Now what we want to do is we want to create our music manager in our scene so that we can send our music asset, our music event asset that we've created up into the music manager, and it will play the song according to how we set it up. Now, because the purpose of this series is to learn what we're doing as we do it, I'm not going to just give you a giant block of code and then you're just going to have to trust that it works. We're going to work through this a piece at a time, which means that we're going to first try and build the music manager. We're going to get that working, and then we're going to build the music player. We may have to change some things that we built before. We're just going to adjust as we go along, and we're going to take this one step at a time because I do think that's the best way to learn. The idea here is that I want a MusicManager script that will always exist inside the scene, so I can always just access it really easily, just say, play the music, and I will send it to the music manager. The music manager will play it, and then we'll worry about all the cross blending and stuff later. For now, we just want to set up the music manager. I'm going to be using a singleton pattern for this. I don't use singletons very often whenever I'm coding systems, but I think for a music manager or anything that plays music in between scenes, and there should only be one music manager, there's only one thing needs to handle playing music. I think it makes sense in this case. So let's just create it and then we'll define this. So first, let's create our MusicManager script. And I'm just going to create this out here. We'll organize it later. Again, I like to do this stuff in passes, like just get something working and then organize it and then do another pass. Don't put that off for too long. Let's open up the script and start defining it. So first of all, we do want our music manager to be attached to a game object inside of our scene. The reason is because we are going to be driving this entire system through audio sources that will handle different layers of music. And in order to easily access those things, I want to be able to add components to a single game object that I can better track in a single place. So it may be possible to do this without a mono behavior, and maybe we can refactor that later on if we want that. But for now, we'll see how it goes with the mono behavior, and we'll simplify later on if we need to. So for our MusicManager Singleton, I'm going to use a process called lazy instantiation. This means that we are not going to create our music manager until the first time it's accessed, meaning that if you don't have music in your scene, you may not even need a music manager. We don't even need to create it. Now, a lazy instantiation for a singleton is going to look like this. So our normal singleton pattern would say, first we need a private instance of our music manager. So this is going to track the one and only instance of our music manager, and we want a public open way to retrieve it because we want to be able to get this from anywhere we want. So this will be the public accessing point for getting this. Now, I'm going to make this a property instead of its own separate public variable right here. And to do that, we're just going to say open close brackets and then get. And what this will do is this will allow us to, if we were to just say return instance, this would just allow anything it wants to publicly see the capital I instance. But then when they try to get it, we'll return this. That way we can only privately set this and reassign this, but publicly we can allow other things to see it and access it. So this is a safer way to do it. Now I don't want to just do this though, because I mentioned that I want my lazy instantiation. So first we need to test if anything has tried to get the instance through the public accessing point right here. If this is null, meaning that we have not assigned it yet, so this is the first time that someone is trying to get our instance and it hasn't been assigned, then I'm just going to clear this out right here. Then let's search the scene to see if it exists. Now I'm going to leave comments here just so you can see what I'm doing, and I can be very specific with this, but really you probably won't need this in your code eventually, and you could just delete it out later. But first, let's do a scene-wide search and say, okay, let's fill this with whatever is inside of our scene. We do a scene-wide search for any component of type Music Manager. So this is going to search our entire scene. It's going to go through every single game object in the scene, and it's going to look for a component of type Music Manager. So if we find one in our scene, let's just fill it, and now we've set this and we're good to go. And next time we try to get this, this will not be empty because we are assigning it here. Now this accounts for a Music Manager that is somewhere else in the scene. However, if our instance is still null, this means that we don't even have a music manager inside the scene. So now we need to create one. Now at this point, we need to create a music manager. I would say from scratch, but basically it's like from game objects and components. So now we need to think about what does it take to create our music manager. So first thing we want to do is, because this is just a script, we need to create a separate game object that will house our MusicManager script and then eventually our music player and audio sources. And I'll just call this Singleton game object, Geo for game object. I don't use a ton of abbreviations, but every now and then I will, I think for the common ones like rigid body or game object, I think it's okay. And then we can, I believe, pass it a name. So if you give it a name, we can just say, what do we want to call this? Music Manager, and then I'll mark it as Singleton, just so we can see it. So we're creating a new game object in our scene called Singleton, but now we need to actually attach a Music Manager object. We need to attach this to the game object so that we can say, this is now the component that we're about to attach. So we'll say instance. Our Music Manager instance is, well, let's attach. So we'll do Singleton. So this is the game object that we just created. We'll say add component of type this same script, which is our music manager. So we are adding a component of type music manager, and then we are assigning this thing that we just added to be our instance. So we've essentially created it. You know, we could also mark this as don't destroy on load, because when we create this, we want it to continue to persist. This just depends on the type of singleton you want to create, but honestly, like I want my music manager to play music through scene, so we'll just put that there. Now you'll see that we're still getting an error, and that's because technically we have not returned anything yet. So what might happen is we would get to this point, and if our instance is null, we'll fill the instance in here. If it's still null, we'll fill the instance in here. At this point, we should have handled our instance at some point. It's either null and we fill it, or it's already there. So instead of doing the search right here, we'll just say return instance. And if I highlight this, you'll see that we have filled our instance no matter what point we've hit. So we've done our checks. If we don't find it, we'll fill it, and good. And this is all called lazy instantiation. We are only creating this at the first point that we need it. So we will test to make sure that this is getting created in a little bit. An easy way to do that is to give it a method that we can actually call to make sure that it will create itself whenever we call the method. So for example, let's put together a public void play. If we say musicmanager.play, we need to think, does that make sense? And I think maybe, but let's be a little bit more specific here and say play music. I think most people will try to run a method called play, and when they start typing that in, they'll see play music, and then that'll handle it. I don't know if I want to do something else with play or not, so we'll just keep it at play music. And for now, we will just do debug.log play music. This is just a test to make sure our singleton is working. So I'll save it, I'll minimize. We'll come back to our SoundSystem tester. Come in here, and let's just do a simple input test. So update if we press a key. So if input.getKey down key code.q. So if we press the Q key, then we want to call Music Manager. Now, because this is static, this is our singleton pattern, because this is static, this public one, we can access this from anywhere by calling musicmanager.instance. So we'll say musicmanager.instance. And then on this instance that we're keeping track of, remember we're returning the private one that we've assigned, then we can run any method in the rest of the script. So we'll just call play music. Let's just press the Q key and watch and make sure that this gets created appropriately. So we'll minimize this, save all your scripts, press play, wait a little bit, watch your hierarchy, and then click down here and press the Q key. And you'll see that we've created our game object with the name that we specified. We've attached the music manager to it, and on that particular component, that will be the instance that we use. The reason why that's cool is because remember, we didn't require the designer to drag this into the scene, which is one extra step that, they may not remember to do or whatever. And in this case, we want our tool to be as simple to use as possible. I want to build it to just not even have to worry about it. Just call a method and it handles itself. In this case, we're using lazy instantiation to get our singleton working. So this is what we want so far. Now, the second thing that we need to do is we need to actually get this thing to play music, right? We want to actually pass it our music event, our song, and get it to play when we press a button. Now, there's a few different ways to do this. One thing I could do is I could call the MusicManager.instance.play music, and that would be perfectly appropriate. However, one thing that I think makes sense to me in terms of how we set up our tool, instead of requiring the designer to know about a music event and a music manager and then know that these exist and call the appropriate methods and expose the references and so forth, instead what I want to do is I want to make my asset itself, this music event, run the method to play. So essentially I want to say song a dot play. And that's all I want to worry about, right? Like we're expecting them to give us a music event and I want to say this music event dot play and it handles all this stuff. Now the way that that would work and the way that we've designed our system so far, that would mean that on our scriptable object, which I've been describing to you all as a just data asset so far, right? We're putting in our data in here. The cool thing about a scriptable object is that technically we can run methods on our scriptable objects as well. So we want to create a method inside of our music event that all it says is public void play. So when we tell a music event to play, I think something that makes sense is to tell it what kind of fade in time it may want. So I could just call this fade time. And it's pretty obvious that if we say play, we mean fade time, not fade out or whatever, because we wouldn't play a fade out. We're starting a new song and we want to fade it in. Now, we're not going to implement this yet, but I'm going to set myself up here so that all we're saying, I'm going to adjust this a little bit, is play and then give it 2.5 seconds or something. And then in code, the designer just gets the music event and then puts in a fade time, whatever they want it to be, according to that particular part of the game. So, I mean, really simply, we're just moving our MusicManager.instance.play into the script right here. So now our music event is handling the communication with the music manager instead of our script tester, SoundSystem tester, or whatever. So our MusicManager.instance.play, I think what I want to do is, because I don't want to do the fade time inside of my music event, I want the music manager to handle all that. I'm going to pass my fade time through into my music manager like that. And you're going to get an error here because we did not set up our play function. So I'm going to receive that with my parameter. So we're just going to pass that through. Okay, so we have our setup, our music event communicating with, let's make sure that recompiles. Okay, instance.play. Oh, and the reason is because we actually need to make that play music. So copy, come in here and paste. So play music and then give it a fade time. Okay, so all our music event is doing is we can just tell our instance this music event dot play music. Again, this is not what we want anymore. Instead, we want to say song a dot play 2.5 convert to float, and then we're good. Okay, so we've had that set up. Now we actually want to play the song now. We have our communication set up, but we actually need to play the song. So at this point, we just need to play this from an audio source. And what we're going to do here, it's going to seem a little weird at first, but we want to account for the scenario in which someone doesn't use our tool properly, and maybe they take their MusicManager script and they attach it to a game object in their scene. We're actually creating this through lazy instantiation already, but it might be worth our time just to make sure that if there's already one in the scene, that we're destroying the extra ones. Like technically we could create 3 of these and we could put them in the scene. Only one would get assigned the instance, but we'd still have the extra ones floating around, if that makes sense. So let's just make sure that this is actually a singleton and that we destroy any extras. So inside of awake, we're going to say if instance is not null, so we already have one, and this is not the instance that has been assigned, then we need to destroy this game object. Otherwise, this is our instance. And we can test this later just to make sure this is working as properly, but I think that should work. And then inside of awake, once we've made it this far, we are going to set up our music players. So if I start typing set up music player, right now there's only going to be an audio source and it's only going to be one. So we're just going to come down here and create this method. Okay, so this is our setup where we are actually assigning some kind of audio source to play music from. And in order to do this, we would say set up music players. Let's actually create a instance at the top. Let's create an audio source. We'll call this audio source. And we will need to assign this down here. So we'll say audio source is equal to the game object that this is attached to. We're going to create a new audio source component just like we did with our music manager over here. We're going to say this game object dot add component of type audio source. So we are creating a brand new audio source and attaching it on our music manager whenever we create it. And we may need to set up some defaults on the audio source just to make it play, but let's not worry about that for now. For now, I just want to make sure that the music is playing. Simplest version of music player possible. So let's do one more thing here where we just take our audio source that we created and assigned. And remember, we called this right after awake, so maybe I'll pull that up there just so we can see it. So inside of awake, we're setting up our music players, creating the components we need. Then we'll just say play. But you'll see now we don't have a clip here. Like we don't have anything to play. We just have a fade time. We need to think, how do we get the clip? And what makes the most sense to me is that we would pass that through from our music event, right? Our music event is where all of our clips are defined. Now we'll get into blending music layers a little later. For now, I just want to prove that I can get an audio clip working. So I'm just going to pass in, one layer and just for testing, and then we'll improve that in a future video. So play, fade time. This entire instance of a music event, we don't need to pass that in because it already knows about it, right? Like we have our music layers up here. Further than that, like we are exposing this publicly. So I don't even necessarily need to pass a clip. I just need to pass the entire music event. So if I say play, give it a fade time, we're going to give our music manager this music event, right? We want to pass it a music event. And if I use the keyword this, I'm specifically saying this instance of this class. So this is our music event. Just to show you, if I go to my music manager, what I would need here is I would need a music event. Let's call it what it is, music event. And you'll see this right here. The reason why this is not getting recognized, maybe you'll know this, but it's because we do not have our music manager inside of our SoundSystem namespace that we created later on. We'll do that and keep everything tidy. Because our music manager is part of that packaged system, I do want to put it in there, not just access it, right? Like our tester just wants to access it. This is not core to the tool. So I could actually wrap this whole thing inside of namespace SoundSystem, but if you weren't sure what was going on here, if I were to do quick actions and refactoring, you'd see that it would identify the SoundSystem namespace and be like, oh, that's why it's not recognizing. We could actually just do some magic to put it in there, but we'll just do it the old-fashioned way, namespace. If I start typing, you'll see it's going to auto-complete, which is super handy. Brackets, copy, paste, cut, paste. Put that in there. And then now that we have our music event, remember, inside of our music event, we can define what other things can see. So all we need to do is look into the music layers and play just one of those layers for now for testing. So we'll just say audio source dot clip is equal to music event the one that we passed through in the play music dot something with layer type, or music layers is what we want. And remember, this is actually it's either a list or an array. I think an array. Yeah, an array of music clips. So we're just going to pass the first one in our array. Just for simplicity, we'll just play the first one. We'll worry about combining it later. For now, I just want to get something playing. We'll save it. We're not doing any kind of checking or anything, so let's just give it a test. But just as a reminder, our SoundSystem tester is receiving a music event, song A. So you'd come in here, let that compile. Song A, so we're already catching ourselves here. We need to give it a song. Remember, we actually need to give it a music event. So if you click this little drop down, you can easily find all the music events inside your project folder. So let's do it that way. We'll say song 1, that's fine. And so once we've identified which music event we want, we'll come back into our script. So this is the one, we filled it in. We're gonna say this song dot play. The reason we can do that is because we've defined a play function inside of our music event, and we need to give it a fade time. So we give it 2.5. You could give it whatever you want. And then inside of this, we're not seeing this as a person who's using the tool, but under the hood, we're calling our MusicManager Singleton. We're telling it to play music. We're giving it this music event that we called it from, and we're giving it whatever fade time. We're just passing that through along to the Music Manager. The Music Manager receives this, right? They receive the entire music event, and they can do whatever they want with it. I can do it even more setup if I want, and I will later on. And I'm just receiving the fade time. We just pass that all the way through, which we're not even using yet, but we've built the connection, so that's fine. And then for now, we're just going to play the first layer inside of the music event. So play, let's make sure that that works. Right. Not a very fancy music layer, but it works. And so let's try to do another one. Let's go to our SoundSystem tester. We'll do if input.get key down key code.w. We'll create let's come up here. Let's create a serialize field music event song B. Once we receive that, we'll say song B dot play just like before. So, I mean, you can see how easy it'll be to set this up eventually. We just create a music event, pull it in, and tell it to play. And so this one will also play from its own data that we, from the one that we passed in. That will also go to the Music Manager, play music, and play. And this one's on W. Oh, we didn't fill it in. Let's do that. Song 2. Save. Play. So this is song 1. Right, you can switch between the two. Now, we don't have any fading yet or anything like that, but we have created the connection between our music events and our music player. Now, for many of you, if you don't even want the music fading, this is good enough to create a system that you can just trigger music tracks from anywhere you want. And that's not where we eventually want to be, but for now, this is technically usable in your games. So what we'll do next is we'll continue to refine the functionality of our music player. We will work on combining the layers. We'll work on cross-blending, handling music players, and all that other good stuff. But for now, we have a basic system that will play music, so it's technically functioning. So yeah, we'll continue to work with this tool in future videos. Thank you.